This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
Can you believe it's May 2024 already?
No, I can't, man. This year's flying by.
My goodness, dude.
Right?
Like, seriously, like yesterday it was New Year's.
I know.
This is crazy.
It is crazy. It's going super fast.
First name Friday.
I know. My kids are about to come home from school.
Seriously. Caleb's taking finals this weekend.
I know. That's Danny's done tomorrow, and I think Senna's done like May 1st.
Yeah.
And so it's like craziness, man.
I was just talking to Caleb on the phone on your front porch, and it dawned on me that, holy crap, he's already done with his freshman year.
I know. It's
Jesus.
I know. It's crazy. All right, ones. Well, welcome to First Name Friday for May.
First name Friday.
First Name Friday. Oh.
No notes.
How are you, Paul?
Oh, God. We got to do that shit. Okay. Hard fail. I was not prepared for that. Psychologically, I was not prepared to come in here and call you. So, this is going to end poorly.
Yes, it usually does.
Yeah. We were recording an episode about where we were just asking each other questions, and some of that was entertaining.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of deep ones in there.
Yeah, there were.
Some messaging and some deep thoughts by Jason Cooper and person call out. So God, that's it's like double quarters. That sucks. You know, one of the things though that hopefully it'll lead in a little bit some of the things that we might want to get to on this episode. By the way, we don't have any questions and I don't have any notes. I don't know what you got, but I was just thinking today, man, I was going to ask you what book are you reading right now?
Oh,
what are you getting into?
Well, for fun, I've been reading the Dune series because the movies were so good.
Yeah.
So I'm just about done with the fourth book.
Right on.
Which they're good.
Yeah.
The guy that wrote them was actually involved in politics, and you can tell by the way he writes. Like he's got some deep thoughts in what he writes. But so I've been reading the Dune series, and then I've got to find a book to start next. I don't really have something right now that I'm getting ready to start from like a research perspective for topics that we're going to do. But I've got a couple in mind.
Cool.
So how about you? I know you've been reading a lot of conspiracy theory stuff lately.
Well, I've got a couple that are in the on deck circle. Well, I just finished that one, the Surprise Kill Vanish by Annie Jacobson. That was really good. And I needed to give myself a break from nonfiction for a little bit. So I don't know if you can, but I have a hard time going fiction, nonfiction at the same time.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to do that. I do it from time to time because I usually have a book in my backpack that I take to work, and that typically most of the time that's a nonfiction book.
Yeah.
And then sitting in my chair at my house, I have one of my fiction, one of my thrillers or something like that I'll pick up and read for an hour or so at night. But I tend to get immersed into whatever story I'm reading, and I hate to put it down. So it's hard for me to read two books at the same time.
Yeah, I can go back and forth, but when I'm doing research stuff, like I have to be able to have the time to like those books typically aren't books that you can just kind of pick up, do a chapter where I can go longer if I need to, or to figure out what they're actually getting after.
Pens and highlighters and the whole
and taking all kinds of copious notes and things like that. And so, and to be honest with you, with some of the side stuff that we've been working on, I haven't had that time recently. It's just been really busy. And so, So
no, I got one from a guy the other day, a retired brigadier general, called Violent Positivity. It's basically his whole story from being a second lieutenant all the way up to a 1-star and some of the cool things that he did, and leadership interactions that he had, and failures and wins, and I'm really looking forward to getting through that. And then I've got one called the end of average. I can't remember who wrote that one, but it was given to me by a guy at work, and highly recommended by him. So those are kind of in my on deck circle, and I'm finishing up one of my thrillers right now. So I'm a little over halfway through that.
Well, I wanted to start today. I read an interesting quote that I wanted to get your take on, because I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
And the quote is, "Staying comfortable is the human trap on the road to mediocrity."
I love it.
What do you think about that?
I love it. It goes right along with what this quote from this quasi-intelligent person called Paul White said, and it says, "Your life will not change until you change your life."
Yeah.
And that's really, I keep beating this into my kids, man. It's like, well, who is it? I think it was Einstein that said, "If you do what you always did, you get what you always got."
Yeah.
It's the same shit, man.
It is.
If you keep doing the same stuff, then you're never going to get a different result, right? That's what the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting something different.
Yep.
And I think that you're spot on with, sometimes you're going to have to try things that are outside of your comfort zone, and you're going to have to do things that maybe you don't like to do. And you may learn to enjoy some of those things over time, but right off the bat, here's a perfect example. All right. You want to from the top down. You want to see a God's eye view of Vegas. And one of the ways to do that is to hike Mount Charleston. And that hike is a son of a bitch. It's like 11 miles. And it's really difficult, especially when you've been drinking beer at B-dubs the day before, watching football all day.
Yeah.
And you do it on a hangover and you're severely dehydrated, right? But the view at the top is awesome. It is epic, man. You can see the entire Vegas Valley, Lake Mead off in the distance, and Nellis. Great. So in order to get that view from the top, you got to do the hard work, man. Yeah. You got to do stuff that makes you uncomfortable. And yeah, you're going to sweat, and you're going to bleed, and you're going to twist your ankle, and it's going to suck. But that view from the top is worth it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, because we get a lot of questions, and we have a lot of interactions with stuff or with folks, and we've talked a lot about defining values. We've talked a lot about how to practice integrity, and resiliency and perseverance, and how to create opportunity, and the importance of being able to pivot and maintaining flexibility and all those types of things. But we haven't really talked about the change piece.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? And what are we getting after when we talk about change? What are we getting after when we say, be the change, be the one? Or inspiring change. Because here's the bottom line is, one, change is inevitable. Change is going to happen in your life, whether you want it to or not. It can be positive or it can be negative. But change, your life is going to change. There's always going to be circumstances, and a lot of times it's things that are completely outside of your control, right? Relationships change. You have a death in the family. Jobs change. Like, there's always changes inevitable. But we can position ourselves to take advantage by the change that happens in life, or have those changes roll into something that's a negative outcome necessarily.
Well, I think what you were talking about with the defining your values, the practice integrity, those kinds of things, those are the processes that lead you to the result of change, right? And if you go through some of these processes, then change is inevitable. You hit the nail on the nugget when you said that it could be positive or negative, and putting yourself in position to take advantage of change is called opportunities. Proactively seeking change is a little bit of a different mindset, right? That's seeking something. That's, I'm going after this. I'm going to practice hard at football so that I can win a trophy, not necessarily relying on just dumb luck and timing sometimes, so a little bit of a different mindset. The result may be slightly the same or comparable, but a different mindset on how you get there. And I think you can look at it from both angles, because we talk about opportunity all the time, and opportunity is obviously going to be a big part of your life if you're hyper aware to it and you take advantage of it.
Yeah,
that's great. But when we're talking specifically about what's on the back of our shirt here, it's the process of how we can proactively do this. Define your personal values. Take stock. Invested in your own self first. And when you do that and you practice that shit over and over and over again, then that leads to change.
It does. And you have to you have to have personal accountability, and you have to be responsible for your own actions. You have to take responsibility for your own choices and the outcomes of those choices. And rather than getting mired in, it didn't work out, or I'm a failure, or things like that, take the lessons learned from those things, right? You gotta do that self-evaluation. You gotta look at those things and go, okay, I fucked that away, but let me look at why. So one, I won't make those same mistakes again, because we've said over and over on the podcast, right? Life will continue to give you the challenge that you need until you figure out how to get through it.
That's right.
And you'll continue to make the same mistakes if you don't do some of that self-inspection.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to, just for the ones out there, I also want to recognize that change is hard.
Yeah.
It's not some of the things that we talk about, and some of the things that we suggest that you guys do, like the values exercise, or those things, like those things can be difficult. It can be difficult to get really inspective on your own life. And
it's hard to be honest with yourself sometimes.
It is, right? It's hard to look at those shadows, those unwanted identities that Alicia talked about, and wrestle with them a little bit and figure out how we're going to move out of and away from some of those things to really become the person that we want to be, so that we can walk in that authentic self. So I want to first say that you guys, like, have a little self-compassion as you work through the things that we talk about on the podcast, because some of the stuff is really difficult, and you can be wrestling with a lot of bad habits, or a lot of messaging that you've gotten over the course of your life that was very negative, that you've learned to believe about yourself for whatever reason. And it can be really hard to break some of those chains that bind and keep us in those same patterns and in those same circles. Part of that change that's difficult is what we talk about too with the 1 of 5, and the people that you surround yourself with. We were talking about this earlier in the pregame a little bit. If you've been running with the same group of folks for 10, 15 years, and you start to make some significant changes in your life, and you realize that there's not that emotional equity, or that they're on a different path than you are, and they don't really kind of fit in what you're trying to do anymore. Changing those relationships, or the closeness of those relationships, that can be a very difficult thing to do. The flip side is find those people that are kind of on that same path. That can be a challenge as well. So there's a lot of challenges associated in this, and I just want to take a moment to recognize that, because we talk about this stuff and we may make it seem easy sometimes, but not all of it is.
Well, I think there's a lot in what you just said, and one thing that I was reminded of was Tony Robbins' quote that I remember, and he says, "You have to participate in your own self-recovery. Like, nobody's going to do this shit for you. You're the one that's going to have to roger up and do some of this stuff."
And nobody's coming to save you.
You know what? Some of it might be ugly, man. I mean, if you've been, pounding a 6-pack every night for the last 20 years, you're going to have to admit some things. And that's where that self-compassion, I think, comes in. And once you start the process and once you start doing it, I think you'll realize that, people are going to be proud of you for the most part. People are going to be proud of you for admitting some of the things. But here's where this is where it gets really challenging, man, is like you said that change is hard. Okay. And it's not just hard on you. It could be hard on the relationships that you have. And you were just talking about your circle and all that. Well, what if it's the person you live with?
Yeah.
What if it's the person you go to bed with every night? And that's where it gets super difficult, man. And Katie and I have had some deep inspections of directions that we're individually going while still trying to maintain the same direction as a couple.
Yeah.
And it's challenging, man. It's really hard sometimes,
and
there's got to be a little give and take. There's got to be a little compromise. I mean, that's really essentially what marriage boils down to, is two people compromising to get along.
Yeah.
Because we are individuals.
Yes, you are.
She's an individual and I'm an individual, and I have things that I like to do and she has things that she likes to do. And thankfully, a lot of those things overlap, but some of them don't. And, as we go through these processes of this continual self-improvement, the personal excellence shit that we talk about, developing a new personal standard for yourself, defining your values, all the little buzzwords that we throw out there, when you're going through that process and you're trying to find your new path, it's always good to keep looking over your shoulder and making sure that other person is coming with you.
Yeah.
Right. And the minute that it's not, that's when it becomes a problem. Right. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. And there's been some some good, hard conversations at the White House over this. Thankfully, we found resolution, and with a little compromise, we can keep moving in the same direction.
Well, I think that goes back to when you're going through something like this, like you don't just have to be honest with yourself, but you may have to be really honest with people around you too.
That's 100% valid.
You know, you have to,
and that's hard,
especially if you have a significant other. You've got to have the courage, like we like to talk about, the courage over comfort, to have that with some of these things. You're aware of it, and if you weren't, that's not your fault. That's probably mine because I never expressed it. But you know, I'm trying to make some changes, and this is why. You know, and by doing that, you may open up a whole opportunity for that person to provide you the support you need to move through it in a better fashion.
You could open a big can of worms too.
You could open a big can of worms too. But if you're going to be truthful and you're going to be authentic and you're going to align with your value system, you're probably going to have that conversation at some point.
Yeah.
And then that goes back to, like, this is also why we talk about the importance of creating skills like empathy and validation, because your ability to empathize and to recognize that you and Katie are on similar paths, but there's a gap there, right?
We're individuals.
Well, and you've been working on this stuff for a longer amount of time.
I have,
in some respects, than she has, right? And so you're a little further down the road than she is. That gives you great opportunity to help her navigate some of that stuff, right? But it still makes it different and can lead to, you know, disagreements, misunderstandings. It's no different for Alicia and I. I mean, she's so much further down that road than I am. She's done so much work that it's normal, right? And so, but yeah, it just comes back to having that courage, because, and that's the piece. That's why I wanted to start with this quote, like staying comfortable. It's so easy, man. You know, it's easy to go, well, like you said, Mo, my daddy always did. So or, you know, well, I drink 6 beers a night because that's just what I do, and that's comfortable. And, you know, it's a coping mechanism. It allows me to numb myself to the rest of the world, and I don't have to deal with my own problems for the evening, you know, instead of maybe spending some of that time being introspective and starting to figure some of these things out for yourself and asking because here's the deal, dude. And we've talked about this before with health. I was flying with a cat recently. He was telling me a story about a friend he had who is a pretty heavy drinker, works in the construction industry, was at somebody's house. He's kind of like a handyman on the side. Was at somebody's house on the weekend doing some floor work, started throwing up blood. Calls 911. They come pick him up. Well, he drinks so much that he's actually, evidently there's like blood vessels that go down like your esophageal tube or whatever. Well, he's decayed the lining in his esophagus so much that it actually broke the blood vessels, and he started bleeding into his stomach, and then he started throwing up blood. You know, and so it's coming for you one way or the other. But you know, I see it so much, and not just in younger men. I mean, I know an individual who's probably in his mid to late 40s, maybe early 50s, and has great potential. Veteran, has done a lot of cool stuff.
It's not me, is it?
No, has a degree, you know, and this individual likes to complain about his lot in life and where he's at, you know, and the job that he has and the mundaneness of it, and how if he could just, there's always something, if I could just get over here, then I'd be so much happier. Or if I could just make this much money, I'd be so much happier. But he absolutely refuses to do anything to change it. Like, he's so comfortable in that position. Provides him a lot of flexibility. I'll give him that. But he's so comfortable in that position that the idea of actually stepping out is so uncomfortable for him that he just doesn't do it. He talks about it constantly talks about it. You know, it's always, oh yeah, I'm getting my resume together. I'm going to go apply for X, Y, and Z. 2 weeks later, did you do it? Oh no, you know, this came up, there's always a fucking excuse. It's like, dude, you actually move into the stuff that because you just won't step out. You're so comfortable where you're at. You're so afraid to step out of that comfort that you just stay stagnant. And then you bitch about it.
No, you're right, man. And this is why you see lottery winners end up broke after 3 or 4 years after they just won the fucking Powerball. It's because you didn't change the habits that you had before, and you didn't you didn't earn that money, and so you weren't invested in it, and you squandered it.
Yeah.
And you see it all the time, man, and it's well documented and stuff. Something that we haven't really deep dived. I don't know. Words are hard. English is not my strong suit. Something we haven't explored much is pride. And I think pride goes into this. It's definitely a subset of what we're talking about when we talk about resistance to change, viscosity, that kind of stuff. And pride can be a significant deterrent to getting to some of these places that you want to. If you're a proud person, and I mean proud, I don't mean proud like, I just won the championship and I'm very proud of my effort. I mean proud in the sense that I can admit no fault of my own. I don't have that humility bone yet. Kind of proud. You're that kind of person where it's always somebody else's fault. It's never your fault. Kind of maybe similar to what your buddy is facing, or the message that he's telling himself. I think that pride can be a significant impairment to finding the end of that road. Pride is probably going to be one of those barriers that you see first that's going to prevent you from starting to even go down this road.
Yeah. Well, I think, and it's so much tied to ego, right?
Yeah, of course.
And all the conversations that we've had around ego, and in this particular case, we're talking about kind of that bad form of ego.
Yeah.
That doesn't really pay you service. But yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think we were talking about this a little bit in the pregame too. When you're younger, I think it's a little more natural to have that pride factor because you're trying to find your way, you're to prove yourself. You don't want to be wrong. You don't want to be, you want to get it right. You're trying to make a reputation for yourself if you're in a particular line of work or whatever. But like you always say, Roscoe, humility is a superpower. And you'll find that when you can admit your faults and your mistakes and be open and honest about that stuff, you'll actually do much better in the organization than you do if you try to cover that stuff up for you. May think that people see right through that shit. You're not the first cat that tried to do it, and you won't be the last. So my encouragement, I think, in situations like that, and I think that this is just, again, when we talk about the difference between, because I was thinking about, I told you I was thinking about some of these things earlier, just kind of the way I thought when I was younger to kind of the way I think now. And when I was younger, I definitely may have been more prideful, in that desire to be good and to be right.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes the focus gets misconstrued in the sense that we want to be right when what you really need to do is do right.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between those two things, right? There's a big difference between pounding your chest all the time and saying, I'm right, or I've got to win the argument, or whatever the case may be. In relationships, at work, you can't be wrong versus doing the right thing, right? Like, don't be right, get it right.
Well, the irony of what you're talking about is you're talking about a younger guy, or maybe in some cases, our age guys, but you're trying to build that reputation. You're trying to prove to people that, you have some kind of worth. And really, I think maybe what it comes down to is you're trying to earn respect. And we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. I'm probably guilty of it today, but a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of ego, a little bit of cockiness. And you're trying to prove to people, like you said, you're trying to prove to people to hopefully earn their respect and have them see you up on this pedestal in this light, when in reality, if you showed a little bit of humility, you're probably going to earn more respect in the long run that way. And this is a muscle that I've had to exercise over and over and over again, and I still don't always get it right.
Yeah,
it sucks. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to swallow hard and say, God dang it, I fucked that up.
Yeah,
it's tough, man. I think it's easy if I were to knock over my water and go, oops, sorry, CAS, man, I fucked that up. All right. Or forgot to hit play or hit record on the machine over here like you did earlier. Okay. Those are easy. Those are easy little slip ups. It's different when you're having a disagreement with your spouse or with a close friend or a family member, right? Somebody who, you value their opinion of you, and that stream goes both ways, I think that becomes very difficult, and you have to massage your words very carefully sometimes around that. And I think in the end, though, honesty, that the transparent honesty is probably going to win you more brownie points in the long run. It's going to ruffle some feathers, and it ain't for everybody.
Yeah.
But I would say, knowing that I was honest and authentic when I showed up there.
Yeah. I can get down with that. I mean, humility is so important. But I think that to maybe go one level deeper too is, if you're so worried about making a name for yourself or gaining other people's respect, I guess my question to you would be, how much do you respect yourself?
That's valid, right? And that goes right back to the self-inspection piece.
Self-inspection and values, right? Because if you know who you are, dude, I've always had a pretty clear idea of who I was and what my values were. And it's helped me so much in life, because if you know who you are and what you're about, and you're showing up in that on a consistent basis, day in and day out, you're going to earn respect over time.
Well, what do you say all the time, though, man? You say all the time that the guys who have the biggest egos are usually the most insecure
dudes in the room. Yep. And if you're being intentional about how you show up, and you're walking in your value system, and you're in alignment and congruence, then you don't really care. And I don't mean to sound trite in that, or like you don't care in a rude way, but you're not wrapped up in, like, the ultimate goal isn't achieving everybody else's respect. It matters. All that other stuff will follow.
Well, the hard part about that, though, man, is not everybody's going to be on board with it. And that's where you get this tugging from the opposite directions, right? Like, I really want to go this direction. I really want to do this. I really want to jump in with both feet. But I've got this friend group over here that's tugging me and trying to get me to go do these things that I know I probably shouldn't do because it doesn't quite align with where I want to go, and that's where it gets really challenging, man. And what we were talking about earlier in the pregame was change is hard, right? And some of those relationships you're going to have to really inspect and take a 30,000-foot view of them and find out. And this is something I learned from listening to this one guy, Ed Milet. I listen to his podcast pretty regularly, and he's got some really good stuff that'll make you think, man. And one of the things he said was, look at every person in your life that you interact with on a routine basis, right? Significant relationships that you have. They're either helping you get to your goals or they're not. There's no in between.
Yeah.
Right. And when you start to look at things black and white like that, it becomes pretty easy to pick that shit out.
Yeah.
And now you have that decision to make, right? Like, what am I going to do with the people who are not? The people who are on board with what you're doing, that shit's easy, man. They're along for the ride. Imagine two cars going down the highway, same speed, same direction, same road. That's hopefully what you and your spouse are doing. Katie and I are going down the same highway. We're trying to keep it between the ditches sometimes. We might be swerving a little bit, but we're keeping it going. We're going to LA down I-10.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe we're staggered formation like this because I'm a little bit out front of her in my personal journey than from where she is. Right. But the analogy remains, we're down the same highway, man. What happens when you get this one guy who's over here on the frontage road and he's trying to keep up with you and he's trying to go, but then the frontage road does this, right?
Yeah.
Well,
makes it 90 right.
Exactly. So you have to start analyzing that kind of stuff, man. And I think that when you put it in a black and white perspective like that, dudes, none of this shit is black and white. It's all fucking gray area, right? It's all, what was it? There was this saying that I really love, and it says you get what you tolerate. In other words, if I put up with this shit, then I'm going to keep getting that stuff.
That's right.
You give a mouse a cookie, right? If you keep tolerating this action or this behavior, then that's what you're going to keep getting. The second that you put your foot down, now every time that other person starts to do that behavior, they're going to think about it.
Yeah.
And that's going to affect that relationship,
yeah.
good or bad.
Well, what you're really describing is boundaries, right? It's when you start to set boundaries.
Yeah, of course.
And, left-right boundaries with folks, sometimes they get on board and they accept it. And sometimes, depending on the nature of the relationship, they push back hard.
They might.
So my experience, it's usually because they view that boundary as rejection in some form.
I think it probably comes down to an insecurity on their part.
They're probably insecure.
Or pride on their part.
They're probably insecure, narcissistic to some extent.
Yep.
And so they take that boundary as rejection.
They snub their nose up at it.
Yeah. And rather than accept it or talk to you about it and find ways to massage the relationship so that it can work for both sides, they escalate, or it's like your kids,
they'll pull back. They'll push hard at first and then they'll pull back.
Yeah. But it's like kids, right? It's like, when you have kids, if you set a line in the sand, guess what they're going to do? They're going to step over it to see what happens. How far you're going to continue to move that line until there's actually a consequence for it, you know? And it's the same. It's the same with grown-ups.
We see this all the time in society, man. You keep moving the goalpost just a little bit more, and you're going to press up hard up against it, step over occasionally, and then pull back just a little bit, move the goalpost a little bit more, man. And that's perfectly natural, dude. But what I would challenge people to do is, on the back of our shirt, it says define values, practice integrity, inspire change. And that third one down there, that's kind of where we're getting with this, right? If you stick to this shit, if you stick to it, stick to your guns, keep doing you. Okay. Other people it's on them. Right?
Yeah.
It comes down to the other individual. They're either going to get on board with it or they're not. And you can't do that. The only thing that you can do is hopefully be an inspiration to them and have them get on board. If you're doing the best you that you can do and they still don't want to do that, that's on them, man.
Yeah, it is.
And you can't do it for them.
No, you can't convince them otherwise. You don't own other people's choices.
Nope.
So, and that's a great indication too. And in those situations, I think the best thing to do is just, you don't have to be rude about it.
No.
But you just kind of let it die on the vine, and just kind of slowly move away from that relationship.
Hey guys, I'm going that direction. You can come with me or not.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's up to them ultimately.
And it is sad. I will say this. Because I've had a few of these in the last, I don't know, call it 3 years or so. It's tough, man, because some of those relationships are, you were tight.
Yeah.
Be it a family member or, could happen to you and a sibling even, especially if you're separated by some distance, maybe haven't talked to each other in a while or something like that. Close friends, whatever the case may be. Some of it, man, it is sad to watch that, like you said, die on the vine and wither up. And you remember the good times, and you remember a lot of the experiences and memories that y'all have, and all these shared moments. But that was a different version of you, right? And that's something that I have to keep going back to, is like, that was a different version of Paul. See how I did that?
Good job.
Yeah, that was a different version of Paul, right? And the new version of Paul is going a different direction. So yeah, I might miss some of that stuff, but at the same time, I know I'm going a different direction, and I know that there's going to be other memories and better memories and better experiences going this way. Yeah, or at least I hope they are.
Yeah, and think of the new relationships you're going to be able to create.
Yeah, sure.
There's going to be new people in your life that are going to have maybe a greater impact on you than those people were having. There's going to be other things to look forward to, other opportunities to pursue, that are going to help you continue on that path.
Yeah. Which is
what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, I say stay the course, man. And I've said this a million times, man. It ain't for everybody, and the old version of you and the new version of you are going to be two different versions. I've been accused of, the old version of me was a lot more fun than the new version of me. Maybe that's true in your perception, but I can tell you that I feel a lot better. I'm still happy.
Yeah.
And I'm in a better place right now. One of my, this is kind of funny. Katie and I have this trip to Norway coming up this summer, and we just finished 75 hard a couple of weeks ago, and my knee is like destroyed right now. I put so many freaking miles on it. Every time I went walking in the mornings, it hurt, and I would limp all day. And I kept telling myself, when I get done, I've got to take a break. I've got to take a break, because my goal is, dude, when I go to Norway, we're pushing it up, man. I don't want to be hobbling all around. I want to be healthy. And this is, guys, as you get older, you have to find your why. You have to rediscover why you're doing some of these things. When we were in the Air Force, it was easy because we were flying jets and pulling G's, and we had to read, we had to study, we had to be at the top of our game, we had to take care of our bodies.
Yeah.
Right. But when you retired, now what? So you have to rediscover your why. And this is why I like to do the things that I'm doing nowadays, is to be in shape for these Norway trips. Because when I go over there, dude, if I want to go hike 13 miles one day and then go spend the next day bumming around, backpacking around Denmark, then by God, my body needs to be able to handle that shit.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't get to that point by doing some of the things that I used to do in V1 of Paul.
Yeah.
You know, it takes V2 of Paul to be able to get to here. So when you start to tie all these things together, I think it becomes
well, and it goes back to you know, when you're talking about, you know, there's some people that go, oh, well, you're not as fun as you were anymore, or things like that. Well, it's not about them. You know, your role in life isn't to show up and make their life fun by being the star of the party for them, or by drinking with them, or whatever the case may be, right? Your job in life is to make you the best version of you that you can be.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, then some of that you know, like we talk about, when you're in the arena, the folks that are in the stands chuckling and making fun of you and throwing curse words at you, they don't matter, man. They don't matter anymore, because that's not what it's about. It's about doing what you've got to do to get you to where you want to be.
Yeah.
So that you can show up in that authentic self, right? Be that authentic person.
Now, I will say there's balance to be had. And,
well, sure.
And that's probably something I need to work on, is I need to be a little bit more balanced in my approach to some of the things. What I tend to do is I tend to put my head down and just start moving.
Yeah.
Right. And thankfully, Katie keeps me kind of grounded. Katie's that person that tells me to pull back every now and then. And that's good. I think that's good. You know, she's in my circle for a fucking reason.
Yeah.
Right. Not only is she hot, but she does these things for me on a mental level, on a psychological level. She helps keep me grounded a little bit, and she lets me know when I'm getting too far down one side or the other. You know, it's different. All right, it's a bell curve. On one side, you got the guy that drinks a 6-pack every night and, you know, eats a pizza and is 40 pounds overweight. On the other hand, you got a guy who's a teetotaler that never goes anywhere, never does anything, and spends all his time in his room.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. There's some cushion in the middle there where I think you can balance some things.
I'm not saying don't have fun.
No, but that's something that I need to work on personally. And I know that, and it's been made very apparent to me through some relationships that I have, that I need to work on that a little bit.
Yeah.
That's one of my failures as a person now.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about how the difficulty of balance, like in finding balance in all different aspects of life. It's not easy, man. And that's something that I really struggle with too, is finding balance. And sometimes it's not even just, I'm an introvert, so I don't have a lot of friends, which is fine with me. I don't need a lot of social interaction. But you know, I'm a huge overfunctioner. And so I can find myself easily allowing me to spend all my time doing things for other people and not getting the time that I need for myself. And that's something that I really struggle with, and making sure that I have balance so that I can show up the way I want to, and I can be refreshed and have, you know, time to do the things that I need to do to recharge my own batteries in order to be able to show up the way. And again, some of that goes back to just being honest. I can remember when I was a commander, and I don't know if I've shared this or not, but when I was a commander, you know, somebody would throw a party about once a month. One of the commanders would, and invite all the other commanders over in the ops group. And, you know, or the OG, the ops group commander, would invite us all over to the wigwam for drinks on a Friday night or something like that, or to the club or whatever. And I just remember I told them all one time, I was just very honest. I go, look, you guys, I'm an introvert, and by Friday I'm pretty smoked, and I don't recharge my batteries by having small talk and drinking beers with people. I recharge my batteries by going home and having some time to myself and some quiet time. And I said, so I will make an attempt to be at these things, but I want you guys to know that about me, because what I don't want you to do when I'm not showing up for these things is think I'm just trying to be an asshole, or like I don't care about any of you guys, because I do. I care deeply about you guys. I care deeply about, you know, helping you with any problems that I can that you may be having in your squadron, or having crosstalks about the different things that we have to deal with as commanders. But like, I'm just telling you now, I'm not going to show up to a lot of these things, and it's not because I'm trying to be a dick. It's just,
that's being authentic. That's being honest. That's being authentic. And I've done the same thing with Katie. Like, there's days where I have 2 lectures to and I told her, I said, look, I'm going to be straight. I'm going to be talking for like 5 hours today. And that doesn't include the lunch break that we went out to lunch with the colonel and we talked nonstop. Right. So there's like from 9 o'clock in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon where I'm doing nothing but talking. So don't be surprised if I get back to the hotel room and I just want to put my earplugs in and read a book.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to be quiet for a little bit because I used all my fucking words, man. Yeah. And, you know, she respects that too most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time she knows, you know, because I prep her a day before I have a teach day or something like that. Sure. I said, look, I'm going to be talking for like 6 hours today or tomorrow. So when I come home tomorrow, I'm probably going to need some quiet time.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's just one of those things. And no different than what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
You know, being upfront and honest. And, but one thing that I wanted to highlight was the two conversations that we just had. You know, talking about the bell curve and how I need to find balance and how you were talking about being an overfunctioner and all that. Listeners, this is the self-inspection piece, right? This is us being honest with ourselves and going, these are things that I need to work on, put together an action plan on how I'm going to practice these things. That's the practice integrity piece, right? Yeah. So identify that thing about you that you need to work on. And you can't work on all of it at one time.
No.
You know, and there's Atomic Habits. I know I've talked about it on the podcast before. Atomic Habits is a great start for anyone looking to change a little something. One of the things that he preaches in there is like we were talking about the 60-1 rule, right? Is a small change today is going to end up being a big impact in a year, right? So make the little change on one thing, right? Maybe start adding vegetables to your dinner. Something super simple, right? And just watch that magnify over time. And then, you know, in a couple of months, maybe you add one more thing or you change one more little thing. And this is a years long process. Yeah. And it's taken a long time to get to the point where we can sit here and identify these things in ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an evolutionary process too. So if you're a younger man and you're starting to do some of this work, you may recognize, you know, an unwanted identity, something that you're trying to fix through that self-inspection process. And work on that, but that's not the end. Like,
what does work on that mean?
Don't stop the self-inspection process at that point, right? Because you're going to find that as you continue to grow, more things are going to become apparent to you. Work on that just means. So, let's just go back to previous example. I'm an overfunctioner. I know that about myself. I've recognized that about myself. I have to do things. I have to really sit down and think about if somebody's asking me to do something, are there any boundaries that I need to set with it? You know, because hey, maybe my schedule is really tight this week and I will always try to squeeze people in. And then, you know, that ends up just exploding my own opportunity to do the things that I need to get done around the house or for myself or whatever the case may be. Right. So maybe there's boundaries that have to go with it. Like, yeah, I can come do that for this amount of time, or you know, I can't do that. I can do morning, but I'm not going to do evening. Or maybe it's something or a relationship that's a close relationship where I want to show up for that person. And so I just know that I want to be intentional about that. And I'm going to show up and there aren't any strings attached to it. There's no outcome I'm looking for. Yeah. And I'm going to give it whatever time it needs. And then I'll figure the rest out after that. Right. So I have to think through those things and I have to be very intentional about that process for myself sometimes. If I'm in a situation where maybe I'm time busted a little bit. Does that make sense?
It sounds an awful lot like planning to me.
Yeah.
Exactly what you were just talking about.
It
sounds a lot like planning. And this is something that we posed to, we were doing a group session the other day and I posed this out there where, you know, guys, when you're debriefing a moment or a day or a week, and I think for me personally, one of my goals is to be able to identify these things real time as they're happening, right? You identify that you have a temper and you fly off the handle maybe a little bit too quickly. If you can identify that in real time, what did you say about Viktor Frankl, right? There's stimulus and response, and there's a middle, there's a space. Yeah. And that space is where I want to get to where I can go, okay, stimulus. Normally I fly off the handle and Yosemite Sam, the fucking smoke comes out of my ears and shit, right? But in that space, I can woosah for just a second.
Yeah.
Right. Remember your pressure points, Captain.
Yeah.
And I can take a deep breath and maybe not let my temper and my rage. Maybe I still feel it inside because emotions are emotions, right? but I don't outwardly express that. And I don't yell and curse out my wife or whatever it may
maybe
be.
I'm getting upset and I just recognize that. And so I'm going to go, hey, we need to put this on pause. I need a 30-minute break so you can decompress and come down a little and then actually have a logical conversation about whatever the issue is.
So what I would say, working on it, when we say work on it and practice this stuff, that's my goal, is to be able to recognize these things real time in that moment, in that gap between stimulus and response. See it that it's happening and understand my test behavior was, and that doesn't align with what I want my behavior to be, my desired outcome, my desired behavior.
Yeah.
And now I've got that room in there where I can alter things.
Yeah.
And I can make a different decision, a different choice, instead of having a reaction to something, now I can have a response to something. Those two things are different in my opinion.
They are very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, man. I lost my train of thought.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say something.
Because I'm fucking talking too much.
And it was going to be great, but I don't remember what it was right now. So we'll come back to it.
Well, Jason.
Well, Paul. Yeah, but building that time is important. And then, I know what I was going to say. And just recognize too that it's not one size fits all. Like there's no magic thing that you do to fix a specific issue for you. And there might not be, you may go, well, next time this happens, I'm going to try X, and X doesn't work.
Try Y.
That's part of this process, right? Part of the process is figuring out, and when we say work on this stuff, that's part of it. Part of working on it is figuring out what works for you. What are the things that you need to put in place? Maybe what do you need to give yourself permission to do in order to have a different outcome, or in order to affect that in some way? So,
well, I think identifying these things it's trial and error. It really is. And go back to my shape and go out and I would run 3 or 4 miles, maybe 5 times a week. And I would be in good shape, right? My cardiovascular, my bones, my muscles, all that shit. Well, I broke my fucking knee, right? So it doesn't work anymore. So now what are you going to do? You're going to piss and moan about it and woe is me and get the poor me's over it? Or are you going to find another way? No, I found another way, man.
Yeah.
I do the elliptical. I jack the fucking resistance up to like 20 and I break a sweat in the first 5 minutes and I'm smoked after 10 or 12. And then I go lift weights, or I get on the assault bike, which if you've never done the assault bike, holy shit, man.
Yeah. You do 5 minutes on the assault bike.
Scoff the assault bike. Go do a 10-mile ride on the assault bike. And let me know how you walk after that. Woo, that's a good one. But I'm just saying that, trial and error, explore different ways. The impact of jogging fucked my knee up. So don't do that anymore, at least for a little while, right? So now I'm after low impact stuff. I can still be in good shape when I go to Norway. I just can't do the old me stuff.
Yeah, I can't do the V1 stuff.
Yeah.
Roger that.
Yeah, I'll get back there. I'll heal up.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you got to build that space.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the same thing is, you can apply the same thing to any one of these deals. Like you're trying to break a habit, whatever that habit is. You're trying to break smoking, right? Well, I'm going to try cold turkey. Well, fuck, that didn't work. I made it a week. Okay, well, maybe you neck it down to I'm only going to have 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening.
Yeah.
Well, shit. Explore until you find something that works for you, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't just give up.
Yeah.
And
recognize. Guess I'm just a smoker.
Well, and don't just give up. And when you try something and it doesn't work, don't go, oh, well, I can't overcome.
I'm a failure. Yeah.
And don't let the failure thing bite you in the ass in that case, right? You just got to keep trying things until you find what works for you.
That's a hard one for me, man. Is because I'm harder on myself than I probably should be a lot of times. I call myself some vicious names, and I don't view failure as like I say all the time, failure is not an indictment of your own self-worth. But at the same time, I know that I contributed to this, if not I was the root cause to why this failed. And that discourages me and that depresses me a lot of times because I should have known better.
Yeah.
I should have studied harder. I should have put out a better product in the beginning. I should have put the effort in up here. One of my values, effort. I should have put the effort in so that I didn't fail. And when I do fail, that really cuts me deep, man. And I have a problem with that sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's part of that self-inspection process too, though, right? Is go back and look at, okay, was I in my value system? Did I give it all the effort that I could? Maybe you did. Maybe just, that's a challenge or an obstacle that came up that you didn't expect.
Well, you don't know what you don't know, and that's what bites you in the ass a lot of times.
Yeah. So, anyways,
we used to, when we were doing mission planning, remember we used to put up the kind of the quadrants on the whiteboard. Say, what do we know? What do we need to know? And what do we not know? And that was always the container that was like always the emptiest. You're like, well, we don't know what we don't know.
That's
you know?
right,
Like,
yeah.
Holy shit. Like there's so many questions that we don't even know to ask yet. And that's, I can't tell you how many people I've reached out to with projects that I'd be working on, or when I was writing the books. I had so many fucking questions, but there were also so many things that I didn't know. And I remember talking to this one guy. He was an associate. We were working on some stuff together. And at the end of the conversation, I asked him, I said, hey man, so what questions did I not ask? And he stopped for a second. He goes, dude, nobody's ever asked me that.
Yeah.
And there was this gap there where we both were trying to figure out, like, holy crap, like that's a question that it's really hard, especially, when you don't think about things like that, when you're trying to help somebody, or you're trying to influence or whatever, you don't think about what you're not saying. You think about what you are saying. And then when somebody asks you that question, it's like, well, shit, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap. And that gives you a whole nother level of self-inspection that you can do.
Yeah,
man.
What else you got, brother?
Dude, I'm sure we could rap about this for freaking hours, man.
Well, that's all I got for now.
All right. Well, let's cut it off, and we'll see you guys next month then.
All right. Be the change.
Be the one. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1 Change One on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website, and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.